What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA Crunch Time before lock. I am your host, Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha, here with John, Squirrel Patrols. John, the hangover. Has it begun? It has. But for fantasy purposes, man, is this a fun card top to bottom. We got values. We got sloppy women's MMA. We've got heavyweights. Heavyweights might go overlooked, which is even surprising. But then we have a main event, flyweights. I think that one, I look at it as almost like a 3-round fight. I don't even know if I look at it as a 5-round fight, to be fair. What do you think about this slate top to bottom? Because I got to be honest, it's fun for DFS wise.
It is, yeah. It's not a bad slate. We've got like the mispriced fighter, but it's it's not UFC 300. It's gonna be tough to touch that card. But we have another pay-per-view event coming up. I think next weekend. UFC 301. So, but yeah, it's not a bad card in between. We've seen worse fight nights, and this one has some of the kind of Dana White Contender Series fighters. They put up what would have been huge scores and kind of their DWCS fights. So it should be interesting. And yeah, the main event is interesting because I think that's going to be one of the fights that I take ownership from, right? Like I always, we talk about these fights. I'm like, yeah, I want to be overweight that guy. I want to be overweight that guy. Well, you gotta take the ownership from somewhere. And I do think the main event might be a little bit overowned, just because it strikes me as it could be just another 3-round fight, and it's not bad. And again, it's not necessarily projected to end within 3 rounds, but the guys aren't super high volume either. So I could see like an 85-point 4th round win or something, and that's maybe a win you don't need to have if some of these other guys that have like 50% chance of a 1st round finish are getting that 1st round finish.
I look at this slate as a test to the economy system of this DFS of ranking your fights. Like, you need to look at a slate like this and rank the prioritization of the fights. The first point, you have to go towards that value. You have to make a decision. And he missed weight. How the hell do you get? He's like the biggest favorite. James Lontop, man, minus whatever now, minus 500 range. And he's priced at 8,200. I mean, we haven't exactly had this one. I mean, we've had situations where it's been an underdog. 8,200 is an interesting price, but it's just too easy to get into your lineups. And like you mentioned, Contender Series, this guy had like 200 plus strikes. He had knockdowns. He had sneaky, a little bit of control time. This is a situation where long term, I don't mind plugging him in, moving on to my next decision. But there's going to be some high scores. And if you go like triple underdog, then you really don't need him necessarily. But I mean, 8,200, he still easily can put up 100, 105 points. That's the problem.
Yeah. And the problem is that he's not just mispriced, but he's a high volume fighter. Like his Dana White Contender Series fights is one of those ones I was talking about where he got 2 knockdowns and I think still got a 1st round finish. I think it was Denise that got 2 knockdowns and I think it was Denise got the 1st round finish with 2 knockdowns, and it was Lontop that got a 3-round decision, but it was an overwhelming decision, like 30-26s. And he got 2 knockdowns as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Lontop, I have a thing. I say it about football with weather, and with like underpriced running backs. Like, I don't argue with math. I don't argue with Mother Nature in football with like defenses, snowy and AC, defenses high owned. I don't care. I'm not going to argue with Mother Nature. I don't argue with math, right? Like running backs that are way underpriced, or in this case, a fighter that's like essentially mispriced now. Like, he was appropriately priced for his original opponent, who was Gabe Green. But Gabe Green pulled out. We've got Chris Padilla in. Padilla is making his debut. Odds are like lopsided in favor of Lontop. Like, I'm not going to argue with the math there. He's high volume. If he gets the win, which he's like very much expected to do, then he's got a really, really, really good shot of landing on the winning lineup at $8,200. Like, and I'm not gonna overthink it, right? Like, I think you can easily galaxy brain yourself and say, well, he probably will be higher owned than like I thought we were originally showing like 50%. I think like 60% is probably more realistic. That's about right. I'll own him on at least 50% of my rosters. It's gonna be tough to get like way over the field, obviously, if he's gonna be 60% owned. But like, I'll let other people overthink it. And if I'm not playing Lontop, Padilla is a really good leverage point as well. He just doesn't have strong odds to win the fight. So, obviously, Lontop's going to be my highest owned fighter. and he's probably going to be the highest owned fighter on the card.
Yeah, I mean, there's been situations in the past where, was it, oh my God, the short little black guy that's crazy, Maniac. Remember, he came in as an underdog price, and he was like a pick'em favorite, and everybody jammed him in, and he pays off his salary. This is different, right? Like this isn't like, oh, we're happy if he just gets the win. And I mean, Padilla actually has a strong path of victory. It's just not strong if he can't get those takedowns. Apparently, Liam was able to tell us on the Ground and Pound podcast, which you will have time to listen to before lock today, that Padilla might go for takedowns. So, I mean, I slightly worry if he has like a strong first round that he limits the output for on top. But like you said, the guy threw like 225 strikes in that Contender Series, landed 175 of them. It's hard to get away from on this slate, but his range is also super strong, man. That middle range is very interesting. How do you what's your next starting point? If you're like an average person trying to build a lineup, is it starting to pick off some of the inside the distance guys? Is it the wrestlers? How do you specifically go about a slate like this?
Yeah, so I think the second most popular fighter is going to be Denise, and I'm going to be right there with the field. On top of Denise are the two favorites I've got tagged. He's got an outstanding first round finish line. What is it? Yeah, over 50%. I'm saying like 57, 58% implied probability from his first round finish odds, not his inside the distance. The odds of winning in the first round, like that's Bo Nickel level, and he's not priced high enough. Like he's not like carrying that Bo Nickel price tag. He's got he's 9,000. So that's the fifth most expensive fighter on the card. That brings up some really interesting possibilities, because I think some people are, you can maybe take Jan Top, take Denise, and then you could fill out, you've got like pretty good amount of money left, and you can fill it out with some of the other higher priced favorites. There's nobody else on the card that I like as much as those two. So I like the idea of maybe taking those two, but then leaving some money on the table, which is not something I always like to do. I think that's like leaving a lot of money on the table is something that's done more often than it's like really pays off. But because a lot of times you've got these like lopsided odds, and when you start leaving a ton of money on the table, if everything's priced appropriately, like your chances of all six fighters winning their fights like starts to like dramatically plummet when you leave money on the table. When you've got a mispriced fighter like Yantop, you can make that salary sacrifice without sacrificing the odds of getting 6 wins in your lineup. So I like the idea of going Yantop, Denise, and then going for some of the really lower priced underdogs, and you've got a really different lineup, and you leave some money on the table.
Yeah, because this is somewhat of a wide open card. And like I said, when you're ranking fights, that makes a lot of sense. I like to go to those inside the distance guys next after there's a value, right? And is there really technically one other value? Is Figlak a value? He's got a lot of hype on the Twitter X sphere. I didn't tag him because if Austin Hubbard has a strong first round, there's actually quite a few fights on this slate that I worry about ceilings if the opponent has a decent first round, right? Like Hubbard can wrestle. Figlak has wrestling as well. Something's got to give, but he's like 60% equity here at 8,400. Is he? I mean, he's ever so slight a value, but lower owned somehow.
Yeah, so Figlak does have like better win odds than the two fighters priced ahead of him, right? Like Silva and Jonathan Pierce. So it does give him some value. I don't know if we need that value on this card, right? And then I worry about Figlak scoring. So he's about 14% odds to get a first round finish.
Matches his ownership.
yeah. His first fight against ZM, when about 25 points in a loss. That's not fantastic. Not terrible, not fantastic. Like Austin Hubbard's first fight, he had like 35 points against Halabaugh last August. I get worried a little bit about these guys scoring, and I think like Austin Hubbard with the grappling would probably score a little bit better than Figlak in the win. Like I'm worried that Figlak does get that win, but it's like not as high scoring as we would like to see.
Exactly, and I feel like that's a fight that's on the chopping block per se, right, for me. And there's a fight right below it that's absolutely on the chopping block. Chow Machado and Dontel Mays is one of the ugliest heavyweight fights in a long time. And typically we look to these fights for that finish equity, the first round equity. But I mean, there shouldn't be a lot of volume. They're somewhat both durable guys. And there's no grappling, really, aggressive grappling. It's really one of the odd fights out on this slate. And they're priced like a range where normally we'd be going to for both win equity and ceiling type of plays. So, I mean, Figlak and Machado fights are like, I mean, it's crazy because they're priced right to play.
Yeah. So, yeah, with Machado and Mays, I put that as the fight I'm most likely to avoid. There is the chance, right? It's heavyweights, right? Like, so anybody can go down with one shot. And so in like 150 set, I'll roster them. But yeah, you gotta pick and choose from somewhere. And like the way this fight is most likely to play out is a slow paced heavyweight fight. If you get that first round finish, that's going to score really well. They're priced in the mid range, which is a good range, especially if you're getting that like 90 points for the first round finish. Maybe you get a 10-point knockdown. Or, yeah, boom. So suddenly one of these guys is in the winning lineup. But like if they don't get that first round finish, this could be like sloppy. Like this could be a 5-point total third round. Kind of fight. So there is some like grappling possibility. So you could get some control time, but it's just not going to be that high-paced fight that we like to see. And I'm worried it's going to be a little bit higher owned than it should be, considering the possibility that like these guys are doing nothing for the considerable portion of the fight.
I mean, yeah, they're just going to kind of stand and trade kickbox, and that's fine for us if you're not playing it. I mean, I had to get those first two fights out of the way because then it gets fun. I really think the rest of the fights are just all the fun fights on this slate. Make sure you guys are getting questions into chat. We will prioritize our Discord if you guys get questions in there. But I think the key to this slate, in my bold thing, is women's fights. Women's fights, low owned, sloppy women's MMA fights, even better because the range of outcomes are so wide. And we have the queen of first round equity until she dies. Na Liang is one of the most fun fantasy losers. I mean, yeah, she's lost all three fights. But she scores takedowns. She scores little pitter patter. She's got the ability to get to dominant positions. She hasn't been able to finish yet, John. And she's facing Petrovic, who, I mean, unfortunately, she's a big favorite because she's facing Na Liang, but she also just lost her first fight, and it wasn't pretty either. Like, you don't want to be losing. I'm trying to remember who the hell she lost to. She lost to Carolina. That you don't want to be losing to Carolina in the UFC. And 9,400, I saw all the ownership somewhat earlier in the week was headed towards her. Is there a world where Na Liang just comes out hot and limits that upside for Petrovic, if not gets her out of there? And then I really worry about Petrovic's ceiling at 9,400. Am I the only one? Like, I feel like there's the world where Na Liang dominates, and then, yes, she could gas out and give up a lot of points, but if she gets her out of there too fast, that's not enough points.
Yeah, so I agree. I like going to the women's fights in this one. And Na Liang, I think, is one of my favorite underdogs here. Obviously with these like massive underdogs, you have to have controlled ownership. A lot of times, like a $6,800 fighter doesn't have great chances to win. For like my higher price lineups, she's kind of a scratch off, right? You're gonna have more limited fields. But like, yeah, this should be a good fight. She's only 6,800, but she's got over 10% chance of getting that first round win. It tends to be like first round or bust for her. And yeah, Petrovic is about plus 200 to win in the first round. That's about 33% chance, but she's one of the higher price fighters on the card. I think both of them could end up a little bit under-owned. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Petrovic is one of the fighters where we see a little bit less ownership than we've got projected. Because I think people are going to know, like, she's really high priced, like 9,400. She kind of has to get that first round win at that price tag to pay off her price. But her odds aren't terrible, right? Yeah, plus 200, so about 33% chance. So you should probably roster her about 33% of your rosters. I think Na Liang, though, is going to probably see pretty low ownership. I think we're showing like 14%. I think it could be even lower than that. And I think people are going to see that it's a women's fight, assume that like, oh, it's a little bit of like kind of soft pillow fighting or whatever. Like, no. Like these women
Comes
have
out.
decent chances of getting a first round win. I think it's about even money over under 1.5 rounds. So this is maybe not your typical women's fight. It's going to have a good pace to it. Probably going to score well. Like, yeah, if this is like a men's lightweight fight, which we can see with these kinds of odds in terms of like inside the distance, over under 1.5 rounds, like these fighters would see much higher ownership. So yeah, I'm probably gonna aim to be over the field on Na Liang, and then
It's terrifying.
yeah, terrifying. And it's right. Like you have to accept that. Yeah, like you're going to be rostering a bunch of losing fighters, especially if you're multi-entering. You're going to have losing fighters, right? I want somebody that's going to score well and win, and or that is going to win at a very low price. And I think Na Liang can do either of those two things.
This is the exercise that I was telling you about, right? Ranking fights. I feel like if it wasn't such a crazy slate, this one would be a number one type of fight on a slate because of Na Liang. But I mean, I guess because we're in the same exact price range, we might as well talk about Victor Henry and Rani Yahya. I just simply put it in my tag, never underestimate old man Yahya. Like, he has performed surprisingly well in the UFC, and 6,700 right there behind Na Liang. The guy can absolutely get a submission at any time in a fight. He's actually somewhat of a smart fighter because he just sticks to his game plan. Let me go and get the takedown, control you. What happened to Victor Henry 2 fights ago? He got checked, man. He got checked by old man Asensao, who doesn't have a chin, and Henry probably should have went in there and knocked him out cold. I mean, that's pretty much what he should have done. But I don't know what's going on here with the matchmaking, because it's like, okay, Victor, you just got nut shot and the fight was canceled, in the second round. Are we giving you a little softball here with old man Yahya to knock his head off? Because he doesn't do that, John. And I don't know how terrifying this is, but it's like Yahya has a stronger path to victory. Like, obviously, Henry's going to have to be perfect, 9,500. He's going to need a first round. Can he do it? Yes. I think it's all comes down to Yahya's durability, because if it gets out of the second round, that means the equity starts going towards Yahya, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. Yahya is a fighter. He's got about a 22% chance to win. What we have is his ownership at, I think, like 11%. So 11%. So I don't know, 6,700. Any kind of win probably gets there. I mean, unless it's like a 40, 45 point win, or the other possibility is if you have a bunch of these cheaper fighters that win and put up higher scores. I think he should be owned much more than 11%. But like if you're rostering him at like a 16% mark, that's like 50% higher than 11%, if that makes sense.
But isn't there one play on this fight? Like, I don't know if Henry's the play. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not gonna have a ton of this fight. Because I do think Victor Henry might be a little bit overowned. Because he is the like most expensive fighter on this card on DraftKings, and like I don't think he should be, right? Like, assuming that we got 13 fights on the card, at the end of the night, we're going to have 13 winners. Might be 12, depending on, a draw or, fight gets canceled. But we'll probably have 12 or 13 winners at the end of the night. Is Victor Henry, even if he wins this fight, going to be one of those, 6 highest scoring fighters? Probably not. And so, it could be, right? It's not like terrible odds, but like he's just, if I'm picking 13 winners, I'm probably not picking the winner of this fight to be one of the top 6 highest scores. And with Victor Henry being the most expensive fighter on the card, like he's probably got to be one of those top 6 highest scorers. So
he's not Montel. He's not Montel Jackson, right? Like, he's got the length. He can be like, all right, yeah, come to me, bam, right? Like, he's going to be volume-based striking, if that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm probably going to be under. I wouldn't surprise me if Victor Henry ends up a little bit higher owned than we've got projected, and if he takes some of like what we've got like Petrovic's ownership. Because like I think people are going to click on Henry. They're going to have savings and they're going to see like Henry's most 9,500. Oh, he must be the best. Like click on him. So I think like that ownership might flip.
You've got the salary. That's what it comes down to, and it's like, do I want Na Liang or Rani Yahya? I mean, that's the state of MMA in 2024. Like, holy cow!
It's fine.
Yeah, I know the hangover has begun. But you talked about winners. and you guys want some winners, check out RotoGrinders Premium. There's never been a better time to sign up for RotoGrinders Premium with NBA, PGA, NHL, MMA, and MLB. We've got an option for whatever level you're looking for. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250 instead of buying every single one of those for a combo premium. 6 months, your savings of $250. You can also get your first month of RG Premium for $40 off for a limited time. Those that want to test run before buying can dip their toes in the waters for a 3-day pass at $19.99. Check the link in our description below for that offer. And I got to be honest, man, there's seasons are all crossing over. I'm not an NHL guy, but like if you want to play NHL, this is the time to do it because it's really, really fun to kind of sweat out a playoff hockey. And I mean, PGA doesn't stop. MMA apparently doesn't stop. We have so much to go after right now. And you know what else we talked about to go after is those inside the distance lines in the first fight of the night. I mean, is there a world where this fight comes in lower owned because there's just so many other places to go? Like, I feel like Mahashati's fights, the finish equity is always going to be there against Benitez, who Benitez fights always produce, man. I don't think, if you told me blindly that Benitez is going to be 15% owned, I'm going to be like, I need a little bit higher owned than that because he hits very, very hard. His durability somewhat in question, but it's like, I don't mind this spot for him because Mahashati still is like, what are they doing with him, right? Like they buried him down here on the card. What, 8,800? Of course he's got win equity against an older guy, but this is a banger. This is like a stand in the middle of the octagon. Let's trade heavies, John.
Yeah, I like getting to Mahashati in this fight. Like, not as big a fan of Benitez. Just like I'm not sure
He
he
could
should
be the
be as
guy
little
though.
an underdog as he is. But I do like Mahashati. 25% chance of a first round finish here. Like that, we have cards sometimes where that's the best first round finish odds on the slate. In this case, on this card, we've got a lot of like high first round finish odds, but it's still like fifth highest, and he's only 8,800. So like he's one of the fighters I like getting to. I think I want to be over the field, and then like that gives me a lot of savings, right? To potentially leave money on the table and end up with like a little bit of a different lineup. So yeah, I like Mahashate in this fight. I don't like Benitez's chances of winning, even as much as his odds imply. And so yeah, I just like Mahashate.
Yeah, I mean, something's got to have to give. It's either the old man's chin or the young guy that's going to throw heavies and take him out early and gas himself out. And then Benitez scores 1,000,000 points. But I mean, yeah, minus what, 115 inside the distance. It's kind of like one of those ones, like you said, it's underpriced. It should be higher owned and more of a highlighted fight. And it's the first fight of the night. Like, that's going to set the tone. And I mean, I'm holding off. I'm trying to hold until the end for the best fight on the slate. You know the best fight on the slate. It's Onama and Pierce. I'm trying to hold it towards the end. Do we just go for it? Marie wants it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the best fight on the slate. When we talk about Pierce versus Onama, you have power striking, the ability for takedowns with power striking being Onama. You have Pierce going in for takedown after takedown. What has the Achilles heel been for Onama, getting cooked in the past, right? It's a great fight. And for fantasy purposes, the ownership's going to be here. That's what's terrifying to me. 40% for Pierce and Onama at 25. You're looking at Onama to perhaps, right, go in there, knock his block off early, kill off that JSP ownership, or get those takedowns, man. Just smother him. Stick to your game plan. None of this shit talking in the middle of the fight and giving up position and getting killed, right? No more of that, John. Well,
Yeah,
literally, John and John.
Yeah, this is a good fight to get to. I kind of like Onanima for the leverage. Like I think he should be a little bit higher owned. I think Pierce should maybe be a little bit lower owned. Like the idea, I mean, Onama's got a really good chance of winning this fight. And the prices reflect that, right? Like the odds are not that wide. But if Onama wins and he's killing off like 40% of lineups when he wins, that's Like, I feel like that's better than Pierce, killing off 24% of Onama lineups, when Pierce wins. Both of these guys should score really well. Yeah, it's a fight. And this is an interesting one because it can score well in a few different ways, right? Like, they are high volume strikers and they also grapple. So we could see this one score points in a lot of ways that makes it a fight that I like to get to. Like, compare like the possibilities of this fight scoring well compared to like the Machado and Mays fight, right? Like Machado and Mays, somebody's got to land a heavy punch in the first round for that fight to score well. This one can score well any number of ways. Can inside the distance, can go all 3 rounds and score really well. So yeah, it's a fight I want to get to. I slightly like the idea of being like over this ownership mark on Onama and like under the field on Pierce. But I'll definitely be rostering a good amount of Pierce as well, just maybe not 40%.
That's the terrifying thing, is like he is your prototypical fantasy upside type of guy. And at 8,600 on a dynamic pricing, he'd be like 9,500, right? Like, he has the ability to score well north of 110 points, like on any slate. And that's over 3 rounds, or that's any form of a finish. So, I just hope that he learned a lot from that Brito fight. I don't know if you remember that one, or if you even had him in that Brito fight, but it was like, all right, I've got him down. I got him controlled. And he's like, do something, man, do something. Yeah. And trust me, Brito in, I'll do something. Boom. Yeah. Takes him out, submission. Like, don't do that. And that's not the guy. I also think Onama's weight miss is strategic. Stop the takedowns, right? Get those hooks, stop the takedown, use the weight, right? Like, the leverage is there, and that's one of the guys.
Yeah, exactly. I think Yontop and Onama were the 2 fighters that missed weight. I think the Yontop one was a little bit disappointing because he can see like potentially doesn't need the weight. Whereas like Onama like doesn't need the weight to win that fight. Like, he's a heavy favorite to win that fight. Onama, could be strategic because that would be like a reasonable strategic thing to do if Pierce is trying to like get takedowns, stuff like that. So yeah, I agree. I slightly like the leverage with Onama here. But it's a great fight to get to, and it's a fight I'm looking forward to watching.
Let's talk about that fight right below it. I mean, I'm excited. Karine Silva has been nothing short of a fantasy goddess here in the UFC. 3 straight submissions first round. But I worry about one thing. What the hell happens after the first round? If she doesn't get that first round equity, and she's facing a lady who set a lot of people back. It's Ariane Lipski, who's now Ariane De Silva. Yeah. And I mean, the last 3 fights, like, she set back Gatto. I mean, she set back Casey O'Neill. Aldrich, I guess, was somebody favored in that spot as well. Bigger favorite. And it feels like this fight has a lot of different outcomes, John. And I'm interested in the ones that are good, but the ones that are bad are also not good. If it ends up being a kickboxing fight, there's a world where this one doesn't hit optimal. So you're really looking at it if you want first round equity, or perhaps Silva gasses herself out going for those submissions. And Lipski absolutely has the better striking and volume. There's a world where this one is super important, and it's right there as a pivot off of Pierce Onama.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. It's like maybe the one that I'm most kind of divided on, because I think people are going to click on Karine Silva's box score, and it looks fantastic. But it's fantastic because she's gotten the early wins, 3 first round submissions in a row, but she's not super high volume, right? She's getting the takedown, the one takedown, and she's getting the submission off of it. That gives her a ton of points, but it's not a ton of like striking. It's not a bunch of repeat takedowns. It's like, I think I'm gonna, you've got to roster her maybe at about her first round win odds, which are a little bit under this, like 31% here. So I'll probably end up under the field on her. It's a little bit of a scary under the field. I just think that people are gonna see that game log and think like, well, she's putting up monster scores every time. I've got to roster her. But it's like, it might be inflated a little bit. Like, I don't know if she can keep getting that first round finish every single time. I mean, yeah, she's got 25% chance of getting it. But like, if she doesn't get that first round finish, you're right. Like, it might not score that well.
She's getting about like 10 to 15, 20 points in the first round before that finish. Like, she's not scoring. We've seen wrestlers go out there and have a base of 25 points around, right? This is one of those hidden scoring that we need to look at. And of course, I have to tag her because it's like plus 125 inside the distance. That's just way too hard to ignore, right? Like, that's competing with some of these upper echelon fighters. And we might as well pivot to the two fights that we haven't even talked about, is the Medics and Means and the Ketlin Souza versus Mann. I mean, I talked about the women's fights being the hidden gold here. Obviously, we much safer and rather go for a Medics who perhaps has the first round equity against an old guy in Tim Means, but we've seen Medic hurt. We've seen him stopped, right? Like it's not the best optics, but at the same time, he's facing old man Means. It's like, is Means going to continue to turn back the clock here? Dirty Bird, go in there, elbow him, get him out? I'm not sure. And if he goes to grappling, I'm not sure what this fight looks like. I think it actually probably goes to a decision and doesn't have a lot if it ends up being a grappling fest. And then talk to me about the Ketlin Souza and Mann, because to be fair, Marnik Mann is in play. I mean, I like my buy low spots, right? And it's like Ketlin Souza, both these ladies came in off of a loss. And you're telling me that one is 75 something odd percent money line equity? Blindly, I have to take the underdog. And it's like the styles of fights too. It's like, are we going to see grappling? Are we going to see striking? We have no clue what the hell this fight looks like. It could be volume striking for all we know.
Yeah, so it's I put Mark Mann. I've got her tag there. I put her in the takedowns article. Like less than 6% ownership. I mean, I don't know. Like,
Makes no
and it's
sense.
tough because like I'm not gonna I'm gonna have way more like James Yontop than Mark Mann, but I could end up under the field on Yontop. I could end up like multiple times this 5% ownership, right? Like if I roster a 15%, that's maybe 3 times her ownership. I don't like, why is this line so wide? It's just 2 female fighters that are going to go in there and fight. Souza, is 11 months removed from a knee injury from Karine Silva in her last fight. I don't know. It should be a little bit more of a toss-up. At 7,000, Marnik Mann has a really good chance of landing on the winning lineup and a win. Like, I don't know. She's got a much higher than 5-6% chance of winning this fight. So, you should be over the field. Souza is a little bit of a more difficult case. I mean, she's 13%. The problem is at 9,200, like there's fighters that are cheaper that I'd much rather get to. And 9,200 gives her a shot at getting the win, but if it's like an 87-point win, she maybe doesn't get there.
Hey, I gave you the softball. There's the Oros Medic is right there.
yeah, exactly. I'd much rather get to Medic. I think Medic's going to win this fight. He's another fighter that has really good shots of getting a first round win. Third best first round win odds on the card. He's only 9,100. I think you got to get to Medic. I don't love Timmy's chances of winning this fight. Like, age is one of the things that I think is maybe not factored in as much as it should be. And not just age. Yeah, Timmy's is like 40, but also like it's a high mileage 40 too. So. Yeah, and Timmins does like to push a pretty good pace, but I like that more for Uris Medic than for Timmins.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about that range down there where the Means is. This is the type of slate where I think you love, right? You can take all those names. If you're not including Means, I understand, but like Mann, Yaya, sprinkle those types of fighters in, and when they win, it's going to be just your type of slate, John. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it is. I think like the Yontop kind of mispricing, or the fact that he has such strong win odds for his price really opens up. Leaving a lot of money on the table. Like, you can take Yontop, who's got really good chances of winning this fight, and then take some underdogs, and then you're leaving some money on the table without sacrificing the win probability of your overall lineup. And then if Yontop doesn't win though, it opens up some interesting possibilities. But with Chris Padilla there at 6,900, it was kind of I was going back and forth over whether I should put Padilla in as one of my takedowns and have him tagged. Just Yontop's going to be one of my highest owned fighters, so it seems that could be disinformation or whatever, right? But I think you've got to own a lot of this Padilla Yontop fight, and then just hope it doesn't get canceled.
No, don't ever say that. Those words, we don't want that. But I got to say, Marnik Mann. Actually 3 minutes of control time, multiple takedowns in the Contender Series. She's kind of that sneaky play down there. I 100% agree with you. So bold take, anything crazy before we get out of here, because it really is a fun slate. I worry about if a lot of these fights are competitive, that they end up going to a decision and we're like, where are the finishes? We expected 1 million finishes.
I think we'll get the finishes. Like, I mean, there's some pretty strong finish odds on this fight. And I'm sure there'll be one of them that doesn't, end in a spectacular finish. But like,
We
some
didn't
of
even
the
hit the main event. We didn't even talk about the main event.
Yeah. All right, we can talk about it.
All right. Perez and Nicolau are on this card. We are both, and I'm grouping John in here, thinking of it as a 3-round fight because it could just be a tactical kickboxing fight. Perez likes the leg kick. Nicolau will just bite down on the mouthpiece and swing. But there's a world where if it ends up being a grappling affair, John, there's one fighter takes over, right, for 1 round, and then the next fighter does. And it's like, where's the fantasy relevance here? Now, the ownership is really the big thing. It's 33% for Nicolau, and we have Perez coming in at 40%. The reason being is because you have that value in Yon Top, right? Like Zach, we keep pointing to that. That's the ability. So when you start your lineup with Yon Top, Perez, what do we say, Denise? Just know you're going to be duped, right? Then leave money on the table. But if you're going to start a lineup with Denise, Yon Top, and use a guy like Nicolau, you hope he goes out there and submits Perez early or kind of knocks him out early.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a fight I'll probably be under the field on for a main event. I don't think it's a main event. Like, some of these main events, right? It's like, well, you're gonna have to pick a side, because this is gonna be, it's potentially gonna go the full 5 rounds at really high volume, or it's just got really good, chances for a first round finish. This one has neither of those. It could go 4 rounds and and be a closely matched fight where the winner puts up 85 points. And I think that's going to make maybe Alex Perez particularly overowned at like 38%.
He's late notice.
Yeah,
somewhat.
Yeah, he's late notice as well. Who's that? Who's originally? Oh, Nicolau was originally supposed to be in this fight. Now Alex Perez is stepping in. I don't know. I think it's a good one to be under the field on. I count 4 fighters under Alex Perez with better inside the distance odds, even though Perez is only 7,500. And so I'd rather get to one of those fighters, I think, than Alex Perez for tournaments. I think a lot of people are maybe going to end up in this range and go, well, I'm going to pick the main event underdog because it could go 5 rounds. He could score well for his $7,500 price tag and a win. I just think he could score, like, this could even go the distance. And at 7,500, Alex Perez gets the win, but is still outscored by a couple other fighters priced beneath him, and then doesn't land on the winning lineup.
Yeah, I mean, in a leg kick type of fight, if he wants his fight and he's leg kicking, distance striking doesn't score very well. Next week, though, UFC 301 already. I mean, it's crazy. We go from pay-per-view to pay-per-view. The machine continues. 14 fights. Pantoja versus Urkog, flyweight main event, 5 rounds there. Nice to see Jose Aldo back, but I like when guys retire and they come back. We'll just, it means fantasy relevance for a reason, but home cooking will be happening and taking place there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this week. We hope that you guys win. I thank Devin for producing. For John, myself, we are out of here.